Why do people say you'll catch a cold if you go out underdressed in cold weather? When different parts of your body temperature is reduced, it weakens your immune system response. The weaker the immune system, the more susceptible you are to illness. No, you won't get sick just because you went out in cold weather with no clothes for a couple minutes. However, prolonged exposure to the cold without adequate clothing to keep you warm will significantly reduce your core body temp and thus make you more at risk of catching an illness. Well, there are some good but incomplete answers here. Point 1. Stone. You have very low loads of virus on your mucosa, the outside lining of your airways, at all time, waiting for an opportunity, or more scientifically, in a quiescent stage or very low division rate. I think the expression, catching a flu, is misleading. You already have the virus, but not in numbers enough to be sick. Point 2. ND. Cold systemically use your energy. Similarly to being tired makes you at risk. Fighting all the microbes and virus that surround us has an energy cost, so if you consume energy to maintain your body temperature, you have less energy to fight dangers. Third, the one people have not talked about. Cold air is drier than warm air. So when you breathe cold air, you naturally abrade your nasal and oral mucosa plus lungs. This creates small opening in your mucosa. The first wall of your defense is damaged, and the inside of your tissue is rich of opportunities for microbes to multiply. Getting sick comes from microbes taking advantage of a damaged tissue during a short-lasting, immunosuppressed stage, where your body lacks energy to fight back. It's a combination of two things if I'm not mistaken. 1. The cold weather reduces blood flow to the nose, which in turn makes you more susceptible to infection. But the other part is that maybe is a bigger contributor to the myth is that during the winter we spend more time inside and colds spread via droplets from human to human. So we might think it's because it's winter, but it's more due to that the winter makes us spend more time inside with more people. Because even after COVID, people still don't know how things work. Now, from being cold you will not magically catch a virus. So if you go on a solo hike and then come home and stay home without meeting anyone, you cannot catch a virus. From whom? However, if your body is too cold and you interact with an infected person, chances are higher you catch it. It's a misconception. What can happen is that if one becomes chilled, their resistance can become lower and make them more susceptible to viruses that are always around. But the cold, rain, etc. per se, do not cause colds. You can run for an hour in the rain, come home, dry off and not be at risk for getting sick. But it's really more of a mistake of association. We spend more time indoors during colder weather, which probably increases the risk of getting sick. But people make the false assumption it's from the cold weather, not from being indoors. We catch viruses from people. We can be more susceptible to developing an illness if our immune system doesn't succeed in fighting the virus off. Being chilled, poorly nourished, etc. lowers our resistance, immune system's functioning. And no, viruses don't survive better in cold weather. We are indoors with other people more in cold weather, which increases our exposure to carriers. We all desperately need education in public health. Because some people haven't updated their knowledge database since the 1800s. Old wives' tales that people still believe. Cold makes your immune system suppressed. Ask yourself why they call it a cold to begin with. Before people knew about viruses, it was widely believed that simply being in the cold could make you catch a cold. We know now that it's because the cold virus is easier to transmit in the winter. More specifically when the relative humidity is very low. and especially in confined spaces when people congregate to celebrate. They say it because they heard other people say it. That's the reason. Humans have been getting sick since we existed as a species. However, a lay person having accurate and accessible medical information is probably a phenomenon of the information age. Think about it. The patent medicine, snake oil market only died in 1906 in the US due to the Pure Food and Drug Act. I am not an expert, but my guess is that most people's working medical knowledge was largely folk wisdom and old wives' tales. However, folk wisdom, old wives' tales exist for a reason. You probably know that you shouldn't eat random mushrooms you find without expert knowledge. Most adults in the US know this, and probably learned it from their parents. We didn't need modern medicine to tell us that some mushrooms can hurt us. We learned it as a species through experience and passed that knowledge down. Similarly, we learned, as a species, that if someone got too cold, they would potentially become sick. Since any illness was much more lethal before modern medicine, it was imperative to mitigate the risk of getting sick. Before germ theory, we had to make the best guess as to what was causing illness. And visible environmental factors are much easier to blame than invisible bacteria. So we developed a technique to combat disease. Avoiding getting too cold. That helps somewhat, even though the reasoning or understanding behind it is wrong. So the bad info keeps getting passed down as truth because folks don't know any better. I've always wondered this. My family in Mexico thinks that if you outside with your hair wet or walk around without shoes, you'll get sick. Hey, anyway, it's not cold, it's cold and wet. Cold and dry is a lot more doable. Viruses and bacteria thrive in specific temperatures. So my theory is when your internal body temperature is lowered just a little bit more, viruses will survive in your body and your body will be putting more effort into staying warm. Meaning less effort, energy is going to fighting off viruses. It's an old saying from before we understood how viruses work. The actual reason people catch viruses more easily during the colder seasons is because we are more likely to stay indoors with windows closed and in forced air than in warmer months. Our germs are circulating among us. When it's nice out, we go outside for lunch, go out for entertainment and activities, open windows, and run air conditioners that bring in outside air. When it's cold, we tend to stay inside and order lunch in, go to the gym for exercise, or don't exercise, find indoor activities to do, and run heaters that recycle the indoor air. Stress can weaken your immune system. Freezing outside in the weather stresses your body. There's recent-ish research that found that your immune response in nasal tissue is reduced by around 50% from just a 10-degree drop in temperature. It lowers your immune system because it's too busy trying to make you not cold to defend you better from the virus. For a long time, it was thought to just be an old wives' tale. But turns out being too cold makes your immune system more vulnerable to infection. My guess is this comes from the past when a lot of people were walking around with asymptomatic tuberculosis. Getting wet and cold would absolutely bring on symptoms. Being outside in cold, dry air obviously won't give you a virus, but it can dry out your mucus membranes, especially in your nose. So the germs that are already there get in more easily. I'm pretty sure at any given time your body is fighting its viruses. If you go in the cold, it inhibits your body's ability to fight them. But I don't know what I'm taking about. So big grain of salt lol. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.